Dobro večer, gledate Otvoreno studio. Ja sam Borjan Jovanovski. Ovo je delno Otvoreno to studio. So mene profesorot od Grcija, Kostas Stratilatis, profesor po ustavno pravo od Univerzitetot во Никозија, но од другата година неговите предавања ќе можат да ги слушаат и студентите на Универзитетот ФОН овде во Скопје. Welcome, Mr. Stratilatis.
Thank you very much for your invitation. I'm glad to be here.
So my first question: these days will mark the 1 year of the signature of the Prespa agreement.
Yes, it's close.
The two countries signed 1 year ago, almost.
Yes.
Already. So what this agreement brought to both countries?
I have the feeling, because I was very much involved, and emotionally and personally. I must make clear that my wife is Macedonian, so that's mostly why I'm here. But for me, it wasn't a year. It's as if 5 years passed, because a lot of things happened, both in your country and in Greece. In your country, I mean, if I could briefly narrate the whole process, there were 600,000 brave people who made a decision to change the name of their country. This is unprecedented. They didn't do it for nothing. There were reasons. European Union, NATO, whatever. In the other side, we had a very different scenario. This agreement was the most that, in my opinion, I'm afraid that I do not express 9 million Greeks who are against my opinion.
Of course, we
Yes.
are not expecting that you are a spokesperson of 9
But,
million the Greek society,
there are
but
some
as an
hundreds-
intellectual, and we are wondering just to know what your assessment.
And to be fair, there are some hundreds of thousands who might share my opinion. For me, this could be the best agreement Greece would ever imagine at this period, in this century. If we speak about next century, I don't know. So, but the reaction of the political system, and when I say political system in Greece, it's mostly the media system, which is controlled by the opposition. The reaction of the main opposition party and by the Socialist Party, they took a position which was not the Greek national position after 2007. No Macedonia in the name. This was an unrealistic position. Then they started grunging about the nationality and about this and about that. But the big picture is that in Greece, Tsipras made a brave decision. He took the political cost. And I believe that your leaders also were very courageous. It was not only your leaders, it was the members of the parliament. And there were some members of the parliament, in the Greek parliament, Tsipras did not have a majority. There were some members of the Greek parliament who committed political suicide in order to stand up for...
That's the other question. Both, I mean, international community, everybody in the United States, European Union said that it was a very brave decision, courageous decision. But on the other side, both Tsipras and Zaev, they're politically damaged.
I don't feel that Zaev is so much damaged, and I feel that this is the case because Zaev has the opportunity to communicate with his people. I'm afraid that Tsipras, if we exempt 2 newspapers and the public broadcaster, he has all the media, not just making propaganda, but telling lies all day long. That's something that has been happening in Greece for the last 20 years. So people are not expected...
We are not immune from this kind of damages. I mean, especially when we are talking about the
Tsipras,
fake news.
Tsipras took a big cost. It wasn't only this. As you may know, Greece went through a great crisis. It was even bigger than the big crisis in the United States in the mid-war. We lost almost 27% of our GDP in 5 years. This was not something that has ever happened in any countries, apart the ones who entered a war. But this was huge. I mean, Greek people were suffering. In the first year, when I was living in Athens, there were a lot of people, colleagues, without electricity, without water. Decent people, you were seeing hundreds of people living on the streets. You cannot imagine that all these people, of course, they are in a much better situation now, but someone had to pay the cost.
Professor Stratilatis, in this context, how do you explain the fact that the Nea Demokratia government back in 2008 created somehow this very bad economic crisis, and now people in Greece are willing to have once again the government of Nea Demokratia in power?
In order to be fair, it wasn't only Nea Demokratia who ruled Greece the last
together
50
with
years.
PASOK, okay.
Together with the so-called Socialist Party, PASOK, they were ruling Greece, and surprisingly, when the crisis came, they convinced all the media to tell to the people, it's not our mistake, it's your mistake. There was a famous dictum by a former minister, a former foreign affairs minister, who said to the Greek people that we were all together who were eating. It's not us politicians, Nea Demokratia or PASOK, and we are going to save you now. To save you how? They couldn't even implement IMF and EU measures. This is the big difference with Tsipras. Tsipras did not follow some left-wing policy, but for the first time, the numbers were correct. Europeans and IMF had a reliable partner. Of course, the Greek people suffered. But it's the first time after many decades in Greece that we have a surplus. We have great performances in many, many issues, but the people cannot see this. The people say that we pay social security costs, the hospitals are still not in a good position, this and that. I can understand the Greek people. But what I cannot understand is that in Greece we have a football match where all three referees are playing for the one team. One team has 11 players, the other has 5, and still this team with the 11 players is going to rule Greece for many years, and they're going to blame Tsipras. This is unheard of. That's why Greece is in the lowest position in all factors related to media worldwide for the last 10 years.
In this,
I admire your country. In your country, we can have a discussion like this.
Yeah.
In my country, such a discussion in private television is unheard. It's only the journalist who speaks propaganda and the famous politician who just says slogans.
So in these very difficult circumstances as you presented, what's the perspective of the bilateral relations between Greece and North Macedonia?
Let me tell you that, okay, we had some thousands who demonstrated. We have some hundreds who are very fanatical, but deep in their hearts, even the most fanatical, they understand that they are not right, that the right belongs to your part. They know it. The opposition leader may say whatever. I mean, okay, he needs votes. But I don't think that Greece is going to be the problem for Prespa agreement for next years. In fact, the political elites did not agree with Prespa just because it was Tsipras. But on its essence, if it was them who signed the agreement, they would celebrate it. And they know that they cannot say a thing because they have European Union partners, they have their NATO partners, and if someone says that, okay, let's see again this agreement, I don't feel that he has a good reason to do it. I mean, he has nothing to win. Greek people really, deeply, most of them, they don't have an idea. They were out on the streets in early 90s, in a phrenitis, in something crazy situation.
Do you believe that the Nea Demokratia Mitsotakis government will be committed on the implementation of the Prespa agreement?
What do you mean implementation? Economic cooperation? Yes.
Both the spirit and the letter of the agreement.
I mean, what Greece has to deliver, apart from economic cooperation and apart from the second part of the agreement, which I feel that there will be no problem because we need business anyway. I mean, Mitsotakis is not against business or...
Yeah, well, but one of the main problem was that Macedonia was blocked by Greece within the process of the European integration. So what's very important for us is to know what will be the attitude of Mitsotakis as a prime minister within the European Council.
Yes.
When European Council will somehow
decide the
consider our file.
Yes. I firmly believe if Mitsotakis has a reason, and I believe that he's a reasonable politician, that there would be no issue of veto. He doesn't even say this. In this electoral campaign, he stopped saying these things. He said these things in January, but I feel that, I mean, all his foreign affairs diplomats and technocrats are going to tell him, please do not commit suicide, do not destroy Greece just for being stubborn. And I don't feel that there is a big possibility. Of course, in Greece we have seen big surprises, and I cannot speak in the name of someone who will govern, but what I can see is that Greece is not going to be the problem in the accession. It's going to be the other countries, the big animals in the zoo, who always...
Like the France and the Germany.
Yes. I wouldn't say Germany. Germany, it's different. I would say France and some other countries, the northern countries, who are focused on EU, on deepening EU, and they want to exercise pressure on Merkel to accept some deepening measures which will not cost to the German taxpayer, but okay, Germans believe that it will cost to them. This is the fight now in European Union, and for them they say, let's think about EU enlargement then, and let's not give to Germany another sphere of influence. But I feel that this will not last for long.
What's your prediction? It's a main issue here, as you know. The main question we are trying to find a proper answer is whether we are going to get this green light from European Council now, June, July, September, October, or the end of the year. So what do you think? What's your forecast?
I would say that it's a very bad age for forecasting. I mean, a year ago, I wouldn't imagine such a mess with Brexit. I wouldn't imagine that the British Prime Minister would not be able to pass an agreement through her parliament. So whatever I forecast is going to be just some prophecy out of nothing. What I can say is that the right question to ask is always, what can I do in order to help this? I know that you have started reforms. I know that disappointment in society plays a role. I know that a green light is, politically speaking, an object with value. But substantially speaking, as regards the speed of your accession, because you don't want just to be an acceding country, you want to become a full member. If you continue the reforms, you will withdraw excuses from the ones who are not friendly, let's say, to your accession, and you will give arguments to the ones who are friendly to your accession, and you have allies. Now, on the political level, I feel that your government is going to do a right job, because it's not only one party in Europe. There are a lot of countries, a lot of political parties. We have some new parties now who won the elections, substantially speaking. Green Party, the Liberals.
The Liberals.
They must find your political leaders. They must find their ways to Elysee. I mean, Paris. They must find their ways to these political groups, Greens and Liberals. They must find there is always a way to discuss, to convince, and if you keep in your hand some successes in reform, it's better. I don't say that this will solve anything, but this is the question. What can I do? I cannot drag Merkel and tell her, no, Macedonia is going to enter. I cannot do this. What I can
How do you explain, by the way, the German position, Merkel's position in regards to enlargement? I mean, if we well understood, they are not willing to split Macedonia and Albania, and they prefer rather to have a package, kind of.
I don't think that this is. I don't think my experience from Greek crisis and Merkel's attitude is that the problem has to do with a wing always inside Merkel's party, who has another opinion, and when the results for CDU are devastating, and they were, and I was afraid for this. This was what I was expecting. He cannot push hard into her pro-European agenda, immigration, enlargement, and there are many other issues. And second, she feels weaker vis-à-vis Macron. Even, of course, Macron has his own problems in his country, but these are not just two of them who are going to decide. There are many factors. European Union is not a system with two leaders and that's all. Many times we have the impression, yes, they're more powerful than the others, but you must take into account the Netherlands.
Denmark also.
Finland, they have a strong, and Eastern European countries as well. I mean, if they do not support you, support you, be your friends in this process, this is going to be a great problem because Poland is a big country. I mean, Hungary is a big country. I mean, a big country. They are members of EU.
By the way, what about? I mean, we have now Tsipras as a friend, lobbying for to support.
Just for 20, for 30 more days.
Yes,
I'm afraid.
And then what we could expect from Mitsotakis?
I would say that in what has to do with the Greek technocrats in this process, and technocrats are going to rule this process, you're going to have, okay, let's say 10% less friendly. But as regards the leadership, he will have just to appear in one summit to give the green light, and that's all. And then after 5 years, when this ends, to give again his consent. I mean, I don't think that the problem will be Greece. Really, Mitsotakis, he has a faction in his party, which is, I mean, really dangerous. And some newspapers say that they control him. I don't believe so. I believe that he's going to behave as a good Greek prime minister, and we don't have any national interest in stopping you. We have every national interest in fostering good relations with you.
Let's hope so. Professor, your field of expertise is, as I said, the constitutional law, but especially what EU integrations are changing within the constitutions in the member states. From this point of view, what's important to know here in our society? What are the changes in the constitution that will come with the?
It's not one option. There are several types. That was the topic of a lecture I gave yesterday to Fon University. The constitution is two things. First is the text of the constitution, and then is the way your institutions work in practice and the way human rights are protected in practice. There are changes, are technical ones if you want me to explain, but your national courts will need to somehow interpret your constitution in dialogue with the Strasbourg court and the Luxembourg court. I don't feel that there will be any problem in this, because in this sector, in human rights protection, you have a good score. This is one half of every constitution is human rights.
What's the substantial changes in the constitutions once you become a member state?
You need to put into your constitution a specific procedure through which each time we have a new treaty, Treaty of Lisbon, ESM treaty, whatever, how you will decide to ratify this treaty. Treaties are something like the Constitution of Europe, and they're changing. Second, you will have to accept that for large part of financial, social, and administration policies, you are going to lose control. I mean, EU law is going to be applicable directly. It's not bad. I mean, sometimes you need someone else to tell your society that, okay, what I cannot achieve to convince you, now you have anyway. We're members of a community of 500 million people. This is EU. It's not some technocrats in Brussels only. It's public opinion in 29 states.
We are trying to enter within the process of the negotiation for the membership. What's important? What the negotiations as such could change?
A lot of legislation is going to change, a lot of public policies, public administration.
What's the difference? What's the difference between? We are now in the so-called process of association and stabilization.
Yes.
And we are looking for negotiation.
Practically, I read the
procedure. So what's the difference of the two processes?
Practically, there's none, because I saw the report of June of the European Commission. They had 35 chapters examining your progress as if you are in the accession process. There's not going to be any significant difference in the process. It's going to be, I mean, more intensive if you wish to be quicker. But you already have this. Every year, European Commission issues a report about the progress that you have in relevance with the partnership agreement 2008, and before that there was a stabilization and partnership agreement, and because you were good students, sorry to speak like this, I mean,
okay,
but
it's a fact.
In 2008 it became a partnership agreement. This is the smooth way for European Union to prepare accession without saying that, okay, let's have a green light and then see. Actually, you are in the accession process. I mean, speaking substantially and procedurally, you are going to have annual reports. Or each time a chapter closes, you will have something, it's not formal and informal, okay, by all governments.
Could we expect more money when we are talking about the implementation of some of the directives or whatsoever, which will, I mean, obligation that will come out from the process of the negotiation?
I don't want to deceive you for this. More money can always, even now, come, but the problem is that in what has to do with the European Union, you have funds for money, but if you do not convince that you are going to use them for their purpose, you are not going to have the money. So the problem always for all countries, it's not that there is not money, but they cannot absorb 100% of the resources that they are in their disposal. So the problem is not how much money, the problem is how much you can take advantage of it, and it's a difficult process because European Union does not give money to be. Corruption is an issue.
I
mean, this is for me a key issue for economic growth in all countries. My economic thought is based that if you don't have institutions functioning properly, and this means anti-corruption strategies, then you are going to have an economy
going down.
A spiral. So if you manage to, for the first time, schedule processes for getting all the EU opportunities. For example, I was here for an EU cost program. There was money. And a university of your city and of your country was the grant holder of this. It's 500,000. You could have other 5 universities, but they must enter into this process to compete. It's not something technocratic, you just write down something. I mean, even today, there are many financial tools in European Union that you can make use of. The problem sometimes is that you don't know it, or you
How
don't
to use it,
how to use it.
or to organize proper capacity to use
Yes.
it. Well, what you read, I guess, the progress report that
Yes.
was issued 2 weeks ago. What are your findings? What do you think? What the results out of the reform processes that were, in a way, asked by the European Union a year ago?
It's 120 pages. There are some 500 topics. I wouldn't pick one of it. There was no, I mean, let's say, issue a red flag, but there were many areas, the majority of the areas, it was written moderate progress. There were a lot of areas that were writing some progress. Some progress is the lowest grade, and you didn't achieve last year's this benchmark, this target, this point, and there were some areas that they were saying it's okay. For example, the efficiency of your courts, the fact that a citizen does not have to wait long in order to have his trial is a good thing. Of course, in many other aspects, your courts and judicial system, there are remarks there. They say, okay, you had some progress in this. In the Judicial Council, you had remarkable progress, but you didn't have, for the other issue, the Council of the Public Prosecutor. These are technicalities, but these technicalities are communicated to a Prime Minister like this, like a list. And the Prime Minister says, okay, I have an excuse now to say, okay, I mean, apart from my will, they're not ready for this. This is an excuse. I don't want to say that it's technocratic issues or the reforms that are going to decide everything. What I'm saying is that without the reforms, you cannot have the other part.
Professor, my last question as a Greek, being here in Skopje, how do you feel?
I wouldn't say better than home, because my home country is the best in the world for me. But
of course,
if there's something next to home, I would say yes, it's the second next to my home.
Professor, thank you.
I thank you a lot.
To be part of our
And
program.
I thank all the people that I met all these 2 years that I'm visiting your city. I mean, I'm impressed by their character, and
hope the students will learn a lot next year in Form University from your lectures.
It's up to them.
Това беше професорот Коста Стратилатис, професор по уставно право, кои студентите ќе можат да го слушаат од наредната година на Универзитетот ФОН. Ви благодарам за вниманието и се разбира, останете со 1 ТВ.